A wise man once said that concepts become idols. How do I know he's right? Because you're going to get triggered when I tell you that science, religion, and government don't exist. But it's the truth. Here's why. Just because something is true grammatically doesn't mean it exists in reality. The issue is that humans are slaves to nominalization. That's a weird word, right? It means making a verb a noun, and we do this linguistically to properly communicate with each other. The problem is that many of those nouns aren't real. Take science, for instance. Science is a verb, the study and observation of the natural world. Science isn't a thing, it's what a thing does. To say you study science is no different from saying you study studying. Doesn't make sense. And it's impossible to be a science denier because every human on Earth observes and collects data from their environment. These two people practice the exact same amount of science. The same is true of religion. Religion is a verb, the belief in and worship of something. It comes from two Latin words, and you guessed it, both are verbs. Religion binds us to a belief system, but just like science, it can lead to derivative thinking, if there's any thinking allowed at all. Remember, if you think what others around you think, it means you don't think. The same is true of belief. If you join someone else's religion, it means you don't have one. The result of pretending science and religion exist as nouns usually lead to their weaponization. The same is true of government. It too is a verb, the act of governing. But government can only exist as a concept. You can't point to it or hold it in your hand. You can't even rebel against it. This isn't government, it's a building. That's why we don't lose our government when it's empty. The high crime of treason is punishable by death, but how do you rebel against something that doesn't exist? A government is just a small group of people that want to govern a large group of people, but it's all made up. And never forget that anyone that wants power shouldn't be allowed anywhere near it. The desire to control another human being doesn't come from a healthy psyche. It's always a result of trauma and a trait of psychopathy. Politicians don't need our votes. They need our help. Feeling triggered by any of this is perfectly normal. I know I was. In story, feeling triggered is known as a call to adventure, and it's usually followed by the rejection of the call. Why? Because human beings identify with their beliefs. We fall prey to cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias, and reject any information that challenges our previous presuppositions. This is why Nietzsche said all truths are bloody truths, and why any organization or institution that creates a safe space can never be a champion of truth. No one who cares about you will ever worry about offending you. It's also why he said God is dead. But this observation was a lamentation, not a celebration. All we did was replace the D with a V, and the result was painfully predictable, as proven by not only Nietzsche, but also Jung. It's interesting how many people who say God doesn't exist will say that government does. Existence requires the manifestation of matter, something that a spirit can't do by definition. But any example used to prove the existence of government can also be used to prove the existence of God. To believe in one and not the other is hypocritical. Just because concepts only exist in our mind doesn't mean they aren't extremely important. The danger is when they're used for manipulation. The ordinary world in every story is based on a foundation of two deceptions. One is that you lack. The other is that experts exist. There's no such thing as an expert. And history shows that the more one is pushed, the less they knew what they were talking about. Take Einstein, for instance. Just this picture alone disproves everything he thought he knew about gravity. The programming of disempowerment always begins with the lie that there is something wrong with your innate biological or spiritual self, and that you alone are incapable of rectifying it. But wholeness is psychological law. And it isn't something we learn, it's something we allow. This is why every hero on Earth discovers that everything they know is wrong. This is true in story because it's true in us. When we fail to make this discovery, we not only fail to be the hero of our own story, we become an NPC in someone else's, usually a villain. For any writers out there, your story is going to be about someone changing their mind. And the conflict in your story is just a reflection of how difficult that process can be. It really is that simple. The next time you're bored, research examples of concepts online. It's pretty shocking, especially when you realize how readily we turn on each other over things that only exist in our minds. Science, religion, and government aren't nouns. They're verbs. So are you. To be honest, so is God. There's only one story. There's only one person in that story. And that person is you.